Good morning, everyone. So we're making our way through the book of Esther. Last week we didn't really actually get into the book. We talked about background and kind of different things that are taking place in the book of Esther. We also talked about the different versions. The Greek Old Testament Bible is longer and it has additions to it. And so we as a class agreed to kind of look at those additions to get additional information. And I said, cool. And today you're going to find out that I partly lied. And I'll explain why when we get there. So let me just hand these out while we... So we will start with the beginning, with the Greek text, which is really good information. It speaks of a dream Mordecai has. Now, who's Mordecai? Let's try to remember. He's related to Esther in some way, but who is he? He's Esther's uncle. But he raises her, and, Esther doesn't really go into all the specifics.
Does it ever say what happened to her parents?
No. Okay. You guys, sorry you have to share, because this is the last one. Okay, well, so you guys could, normally we have a couple left over for expansion or shrinkage or whatever, but so today we will really not get into Esther, because this is really all background information from the book of Esther. So we're going to learn a little bit about the current queen, court dynamics, and also between chapter 1 and 2, some events happen which the book of Esther doesn't cover. And so we'll kind of get into that. And I think it helps explain a little bit what the king does at the end of chapter 1, and even some of the dynamics later on in the book of Esther. Okay? So, okay. So there's an addition A, because the different parts of the Greek text which were added to the Hebrew text, they're called various additions. So there's addition A, and we don't cover all of it, because part of addition A is Mordecai becoming aware of this plot against Xerxes. Okay, he's the emperor of Persia. Okay, so let's turn to the book of Esther. But right now, we'll want to go over this, okay? Because this is not in our Bibles, because our Bibles only contain what's written in Hebrew and in a couple places Aramaic. Well, there's a few Persian words in Esther, but we won't quibble. Okay? So this is the dream of Mordecai. This is on page 1. In the second year of the reign of great King Artaxerxes, on the first day of Nisan, that's a month in the Jewish calendar, Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, the tribe of Benjamin, had a dream. So this just kind of lets us know, right, his kind of lineage, and that this guy's really a Jewish man. Okay, so he was a Jewish man living in the city of Susa, which is the capital of the Persian Empire, though there are other seats of power, because the Persian Empire is huge. So, any reasonable leader has to delegate authority, okay, in order to kind of manage something so big. Okay? So he was a Jewish man living in the city of Susa, a great man who served in the court of the king. So Mordecai's Jewish, and he's a servant of the king. So he's part, of course, the king has a huge number of people who serve him. So, so in and of itself, that's not a big deal. He was from the captives Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had deported from Jerusalem with Jeconiah, the king of Judah. So he's an old man now, but he was probably a kid when this happened. Okay, or maybe not. There's still a fair amount of time before Greece is going to take over Persia. And this was his dream. Behold, there was noise and tumult, thunder and earthquake, confusion on the earth. Two great dragons came forth, both ready for combat. A great roar came forth from them, and at the sound of them every nation prepared to wage war against the nation of the just. Okay. Take a guess. Who's the nation of the just? Yes, okay. So you have to say, why is this even in the text? So this really is not a dream about dragons. Dragons represent something. Okay? So, and indeed it was a day of gloom and darkness, tribulation and anguish, oppression and great confusion upon the earth. The entire upright nation was troubled, fearing the evils against them. They were prepared to perish, and they cried out to God. And at their cry there came forth, as it were, from a small spring, a great river having abundant water. So something bad. So Mordecai has a dream, and if the great nation is the people of Israel or the people of Israel, then something bad is going to happen. So this is kind of a prophetic dream in imagery, right? And something bad is going to happen, and yet what? And at their cry came forth. So is whatever coming forth part of the rescue, part of the solution? But notice how it starts out. As it were from a small spring, a great river having abundant water. There was light, and the sun rose, and the lowly were exalted, and they devoured the esteemed. Okay. Mordecai, who had seen this vision and what God was planning to do, awoke. He kept it in his heart and wished to ponder it until night. So, what does this dream prepare us for? Right, this was added to the Hebrew text, right, to kind of give us context. So, Mordecai sees dark days coming ahead for the Jewish people living in the empire. Okay? And of course, that's the upright nation, right? Okay? But it's quite interesting how the solution or the rescue, how is it stated? And it were from a small spring, a great river having abundant water. So last week when we looked at Esther, we said we see development of Esther as a person. And we say, okay, well, Esther starts out just being compliant, passive. Things happen to her and she complies. She may have complained, but if so, it's not recorded in the text. So the text shows us Esther, who is a good daughter of Israel, who's listening to her uncle, and then she becomes active as opposed to passive. And then, of course, toward the end, it's not just active, but she's actually authoritative. She's commanding. So, in a sense, Mordecai's dream, right, portends this change, right? A small spring into a great river. So, pretty cool. Okay. So, Mordecai is like, wow, okay, something bad this does not look good. But right now, he's kind of holding it to himself. Okay. And so this is really good information because it gives us more of the sweep of what's happening. Okay? And so dragon, because that's part of his dream, right? So two dragons basically are kind of gonna have at it, right? So if we look at the Septuagint, the Greek language Old Testament, how is dragon used? We see it used for a lot of things. It could be a dangerous land animal, a snake, large land reptiles, sea creatures, powerful serpents, a great dragon. So if you ever read Bel and the Snake or Bel and the Serpent, that's a cool addition to Daniel. You should read that. It gives all the political intrigue behind the religious persecution for Daniel. There's a lot more than, anyway. And other creatures. So Rahab, Leviathan or Leviathan, and Yom, these are in Job. So a dragon is sometimes a symbol of a pagan ruler. Here the dragons represent two nations, Persia and Israel, lived out in the lives of Haman and Mordecai. So we haven't yet met Haman in the book, but Haman is if you were to say, he's the king's right-hand man. He's the king's primary advisor, and he wasn't born Persian, because that's not a Persian name, though his sons have Persian names. So that's always kind of interesting to kind of see this happen. So, question on page 2, who is the upright nation? Israel. Okay? And I don't think you need to be a Jewish person kind of reading this or hearing this to kind of know, oh yeah, that's who's being referred to. And how does God answer this prayer? Well, he hasn't answered it yet, right? Well, excuse me, this is just a dream, but anyways, how does God answer this? I should have said dream, okay? But nation's prayer, okay? And then here's a little blurb. Esther will be revealed as the great river. That's chapter 10, verse 6, but verse 6 is part of the addition of the Septuagint. It's not part of the original Hebrew text, okay? And then the light is the time of light. The light is, and this is the quote from chapter 8, is the time of light, gladness, joy, and honor for the Jews. And that's from chapter 8. So all of this really revolves on how God is working through Esther. Okay? Now, did you notice that, I'm just trying to see, because this right here down at, right at toward the end of the quotation that I take from the Septuagint, Mordecai had seen this vision and what God. See, the Hebrew text never mentions God. The Greek text does. Okay? So I guess what is implied in the Hebrew text, that God is working, right? The Greek text says more overtly. Okay? All right. So we're going to learn about the greatness of Xerxes, or Artaxerxes, or I don't like to use the word Ahasuerus because it's hard to say. At least it is for me. Okay? But and so the first couple verses is going to tell us who Xerxes is, and basically how large the Persian Empire is. So if we take a look on page 2, you can kind of see the dark area. I'm glad it came out in black and white. You can kind of see the expanse of the Persian Empire. It goes from northern Africa into a bit of Europe, right? And then basically toward India, or in today what would be part of India, okay, or very close to it, okay? So you can kind of see, it's kind of, so it would cover, I think it would cover the Ukraine today, wouldn't it? So, no? Oh. Oh, is it? Okay. I need a geography lesson. Okay. But you can kind of see it's a large, expansive territory, isn't it? Yeah. So you could say it rivals the Roman Empire, except the Roman Empire really it covers similar property, land mass, but then doesn't go as far east, but goes farther west and north. So it could be the Roman Empire was probably larger at its zenith than Persia. Okay. So it takes a lot to kind of rule an empire, because there isn't electronic communications, right? So yeah. Okay, let's turn to Esther, and we'll read the first 2 verses. Okay. So now in the days of Xerxes, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In these days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the capital. Okay, so it's just giving us the lay of the land. Who's the emperor? What does he rule over? The capital city. Okay, and so he's a powerful man, at least officially, right? Because he's running this empire. Okay. And we'll get a hint of some of how well some of what the Persians did happen, their postal service and other things like that. Okay, 127 provinces. Well, we're not exactly sure what the text is meaning, because Persia was divided into satrapies, or satrap would be right. And throughout Persia's history, it varied between 20 to 30. So this obviously includes, right, smaller parts than just, right? So, or it could be symbolic, basically representing, portraying that Xerxes is powerful and basically rules over the earth, even though he doesn't rule all the earth. Okay, and that's the interpretation of the Talmud from ages ago. Okay, and so I reference that and go, well, how can they? Because it's if you're into like the use of numbers, and I'm not really convinced that this is a metaphorical way of saying that he's powerful and rules over, metaphorically, all the earth, but it could be. All we know is that 127 does not actually match the number of satrapies that Persia ever had. Okay, so it's smaller portions of divisions of property and land, but we don't know what those are. Okay, and I think we just have to be okay with it because that's what the text says. Okay, so we know the basics, and now we're going to become aware of something. Okay, so let's look at verses 3 and 4. Okay, because we're going to see a couple of interesting things happening. Okay, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all the officials and servants. Now, what is meant by the word "all" here? A whole bunch of people were included, right? It's hyperbolic, not for every, right? We talk that way, right? Yeah. But I mean, so that's how but yeah, it's this huge thing, and it's so huge that the writer uses the word "all." Okay? Okay. And that's not weird in a sense of, okay, in this context and setting. That doesn't mean that other uses of "all" don't mean all. Okay? So we have to be good readers. Okay, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media, so, Persia and the Medes, there's actually more people groups, but those are the two central groups that make up the core of the Empire of Persia, okay? Especially as Persia expands and includes other groups and whatnot, right? Including Greek-speaking peoples and whatnot, okay? So the army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. Wow. So this is a grand party, okay? And so I cannot imagine everybody being there the entire time because people still have to run the empire, okay? But it's this grand festival and feast which the primary rulers and people beneath him are all participating in, taking part of over a period of 6 months.
How about open house?
Okay. So this is really a lavish display of what? Of wealth, of power. So always consider the subtext, right? Because this is huge, right? So if you say, okay, let's say if something like this was needed, why? What is Xerxes trying to do? See? So he's trying to make a statement, and even let's say, okay, let's just say he's a partying dude. Okay? You have to say, well, there has to be other underlying reasons even other than that. So he's, this is obviously a statement of his wealth and power. Okay? And then you think, if it was necessary, and I don't know if it is, the text doesn't say if it's necessary, but if Xerxes thinks something like this might be necessary or helpful, that means there's probably cracks in his empire. And so in a sense, this sort of thing lets people under him, hey, I'm powerful, I'm rich, support me, and this is yours, right? That's kind of the implication of all this, isn't it? Right? So, so don't turn your back on me. I mean, otherwise you just go, that just seems to be this giant party for what? I mean, we have to ask these questions, okay? At least I think it's prudent to ask. Okay? And I think we're going to find out that stuff's going on in the Persian Empire. And what we'll find out is historically, when we look at the history of Persia, Persia's beginning to descend. Even though, from outward appearances, Persia is the mighty power in the world. Okay? And I think Xerxes is aware of this. He's the emperor, and he knows he's having a hard time keeping everybody together, everybody loyal to the Persian Empire. Okay? So that's versus, so this giant party, huge display of power and wealth, and with all the implications that come with it. Okay? Well, let's see what else is happening, okay? Let's read verses 5 through 8. Okay? And when these days were completed, what does that mean? Yeah, the 180, right? Yeah, because who do you think did most of the work? Oh, yeah. I mean, come on, right? You know, those guys. Wow. So, okay, and when those days were present, the king gave for all the people present in Susa. Okay, so the people who really made all this come together, who really made this giant party celebration, display of power possible. Okay, for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days. So this is a thank you feast for everybody. Okay, in Susa, who helped make this possible, who are part of his inner core. Okay, so this is kind of a thank you. Now I don't know, who the people were who had to put this together. If it were the same people, they maybe go, "Thank you very little, Emperor," right? I mean, now I have to put together this other party. So, but who knows? Who knows? I mean, I have to chuckle at that. Yeah. So, oh boy. Reminds me of being in the military when a general comes and you're scraping the floor with razor blades, and then you go, the general knows that, we're doing all this stuff to make it look nice, that it doesn't look like this normally. But oh well, there you are. It's rough being at the bottom. For those of you who were ever enlisted in the military, Oh man, too many fun stories, I'll tell you. Okay, so when he gave 7 days, right, both great and small. Okay, so in other words, it doesn't matter. Attending this party isn't dependent on your station. This party is meant for the emperor down to the lowest servant. So this really is kind of a thank you. This is a tangible thank you. Well, after 6 months of wow, that doesn't seem too crazy, right? So let's continue on. Now listen to the description of this. So the first party, we don't really get a description of the innards, just that it lasts 100 days or 180 days, right? So if we're going to say, what does it say about Xerxes? Well, that's really told to us by the length of the celebration, right? And how large it is, okay? So this one, there were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble, or it could be alabaster in the Hebrew, it could be either word, and couches of gold and silver on mosaic pavement of I mean, I didn't even know what that word was. Like, what is that? So it's basically kind of crystalline kind of stones that are reflective. So, okay, see. So, mosaic pavement of that word, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Okay? Drinks were served in golden vessels. vessels of different kind. I mean, this is just, it's the descriptions are, it's elaborate and beautiful. Okay? And the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff in his palace to do as each man desired. So, everybody is allowed to drink as much as he or she wants. Okay? Now, if you do something stupid, well, hey, that's something else. But the king is opening up whatever is available for everyone to drink who is part of this party. And so, greatest to least. So this is, pretty much his entire palace who makes all the things work. Okay? So this is a big deal. Okay? So I kind of messed up. I titled this competing party number. It should be competing party number 1, hosted by Xerxes, because we're going to find out somebody else is hosting a party. You read between the lines. I will say before we read this, from what we know historically, when there were events, it wasn't as if women were not included. Okay, so it wasn't as if, oh, well, this was kind of normal. What we're going to find out is that what the queen does is not normal. So, and if you realize it's not normal, then you go, oh, this is not good, right? So yeah. Okay. So 180-day party, and if you think, okay, and I may be reading too much between the lines, but if cracks are starting to form in the Persian Empire, and Xerxes really wants everyone to know that, hey, this Persian Empire is going to be around for centuries more, okay, and I'm the emperor, and everyone should what? Should swear fealty to me, okay? Then what happens next might be troublesome. It's different if you're really secure and everything is going smoothly and you can overlook something, but if things are not, okay? So let's now read about competing party number 2. And notice the amount of real estate that's placed for it, that's used up to describe this. It's almost, if it's just put it in there just to let us go, it's like the other shoe drops and that's it, right? Verse 9, okay? We'll finish with 8. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace. Okay. Would that include the queen? Yes. The queen, the eunuchs who attend her. I mean, yeah. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged, notice that, to the palace that belonged to, King, I'm going to say Xerxes. That's a giant clue, right? That even if you're not aware of this, the palace belongs to whom? And the king is hosting what? A party as a thank you. And what is she doing? She's hosting a party of her own. This is a competing party, and it can be in no way understood but to be disrespectful. There's something going on in their marriage. I don't know what it is, but it's not good. And it's being displayed in the public arena. Like Charles and Diana, right? Yeah. All the stuff that took, when their marriage just like went down to crapper, and then all this stuff starts being shown in public. It's something like that, okay? And it's not good. So, now in the time of King Henry VIII, things may have turned out differently for Diana in the sense that, if Charles were king and it were 500 years earlier or whatever, he may have just took care of business himself, okay? So, but we'll have to see. But this is not good, no matter how you look at it, Okay? Especially when we understand that in these sorts of things, the queen should be there in some capacity. Because this is not just a personal party, but it is a public event. See, so there are differences there's overlap, but there's a difference between public and private. And so, private do whatever, but in public, this is bad. Okay. So let's turn to page 2. I have this little thing which shows the percentage of real estate that takes place within the book of Esther to kind of let us know, okay? If you want to say, what should we understand is important? Okay, so the first party is 180 days. That's 2 verses. Okay, the second party, which is 7 days, okay, lasts 4 verses, and then the second. Come on, Rich, you're messing up here? Okay, the other competing party, anyway, is 12 verses. So, in other words, what we're going to find out is that the amount of real estate that the verses use will show that the most important event will be the last day, which we have not yet got to. Okay, so this is just letting us know that of the 187 days, so much is spent on this, so much is spent on this, but the huge majority of it's spent on the last day of 187 days, because you have the 180-day party, and then right? So whatever's happening on this last day is important. And so, we're just glossing over this stuff, and now we're slowing down. So this is like if you're watching a movie, now it's slow motion, okay? Because we're not supposed to miss what's happening here. And so we're going to come across a lot of verses describing this. Okay? So this is what I wrote, and this is on page 3. The text uses different ways to convey Xerxes' power. The first party did this through large numbers and might. The powerful were there for 180 days. The second, okay, that was the one he hosted, right? I did this through particulars, the architecture, furniture, and hangings in the palace. Okay, so now we will explore how the book of Esther shows Xerxes is powerful in the last of 187 days. Maybe I should have put this graphic below, but oh well. This is what happens when you put it together, and it is what it is. Okay, let's look at verses 10 and 11. Okay, are we ready for that? On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine. We'll get into what's happening here. He commanded Mehuman, Bisthma. Now remember these names. No, I'm kidding. Harbonah, Bigtha, and Ab. These obviously aren't big names in Scripture because nobody's named those today. Not like Jeremiah, right? Zethar and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who served the presence of the king Ahasuerus. Okay, it's the 7th day, and what else do we notice? There are 7 of what? 7 eunuchs. So the symbology is right. He doesn't need 7 eunuchs. But it's the 7th day, and he's having 7 eunuchs. This is another display of power, right? Okay, so. And if you're a eunuch, your parts are kind of removed so that way you're not tempted to mess with the king's women. And usually this is done when you're young. And I'm trying to get grody here, but it needs to happen before puberty. Okay, because if you're fully matured and that's all I'm going to say. Okay. Read it up. Look it up in an encyclopedia or Google it or something, right? So, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown. Ah, okay, so this is a state function. Her royal crown. Okay? In order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. Okay. So, there's wordplay going on on here in the Hebrew, and we don't miss it because the same word's not being used in English. But I highlight this near the bottom of page 3. The king was merry with wine, as the text says. Okay, she was lovely to look at. So let's go with this. The king was pleased, tov, okay, and she was pleasing, tovah. See? So, in other words, the king wants to add pleasure atop pleasure. Okay? And part of this is he wants everybody to know, this might be fitting, that he's the grand poobah. Right? That he's large and in charge, that he's the man, right? Like what was the expression of old? Well, give it to the man. He's the man, right? So, yeah, and so this kind of, it seems as if this is a polite way to say that he's drunk, okay? And he wants his wife to be, he wants the queen to be there with her crown, okay? So, the queen is not only a recognition of who she is, but it's a recognition of who he is. Okay? So, so if you think about this, well, you guys have lived in the world long enough, and you see this old rich dude who has a pretty young woman by his side, and you're like, dude, if that guy didn't have money, there was no way she would be with him, because he's ugly as sin. And sure enough, often that's true. So, but the whole point is that what? See, this displays, right, that I don't know if he was ugly or not, but I'm powerful enough to get a pretty wife. Okay, so this is drunkenness, and you have the personal and the state blending together in maybe not a very good way. Okay, so now there's one Jewish tradition. We don't know if this was true. Okay, but one Jewish tradition says that he wanted Queen Vashti to come out naked except for her crown. This could be total nonsense, because it's only one, and it's not substantiated. But unless somebody was just kind of thinking this up as a possibility, so I wouldn't run with this. Historically, this has no credence. It would be hearsay in a court, but just to know that it could have been possible. Okay, especially since the text is really in a polite way saying the king was drunk. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, but Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. At this the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. So yeah, okay. Why would he be enraged? Yeah, he's the king. This is a public event. This is with all the people in Susa who made the previous party possible. And now she basically doesn't show up at his command? See, what we'll learn is that no one is even allowed to approach the king unless he authorizes it, at the penalty of death. Right? So this guy maintains the reins of power, and we say, well, that's totally absurd. Why would anybody? Well, the whole thing is that when you look throughout antiquity, being the guy in charge is the most dangerous place to be, and most rulers have a short life, and they're usually killed. So you have to have really a good security apparatus within the system to prevent this from happening. Okay, so and a lot of this is perception. You can't be seen as weak, because if you're seen as weak, right, then the wolves circle. Okay, so this doesn't really happen today, especially when we have peaceful transitions of power. Okay, so in many ways we can't even understand this, because this isn't the way our nation operates. Okay, no matter what people say about January 6th, right? I mean, that wasn't a real insurrection. And if it were, the dude who planned it needs to be fired, for incompetence. So, okay. So Vashti may have thought that coming before the king and his advisors to display her beauty beneath her station. Maybe so. But he's the king and she's not. Public displays of beauty were usually expected of concubines, not queens. So it's not as if she didn't have a leg to stand on, but if she was holding a competing party, and then in a sense, so the king is saying, well, I'm going to have the queen come before me, that in a sense will kind of erase the competing party. Right? Well, she's here, and right, and she was, and the implication is, well, she was having a party, but I gave the okay, and see, and all of that would kind of make all that go away, and now it doesn't go away, but she had a competing party, and she refuses to come. Well, a whole bunch of other people are there. Oh boy. Whew. I would not want to see the reaction, I'll tell you. So, okay. Are we ready to continue? Verses 13 through 15. Okay? Then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, we're not really sure what the times means, this expression, but I don't know. The Greek text really says who knew the law. But still, that's kind of a weird way to refer to the times. Maybe that's a way to refer to the, maybe the situation, the context, what impact will this have in the empire? Maybe that's a way of saying that, by context. And I'm thinking it's not, I think law is too narrow. I think they're going to say, well, what's the impact of the queen disrespecting me in public? What's your measure of this? What's your take on this? So then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment. The men next to him being, and then it gives a whole list of names of who these people are. Okay, the 7 princes of Persia and Media who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. Okay, so he's saying what should we do? How should we respond, right? According to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti because she has not performed the command of the king? See, that's what's really at stake. He may feel stung personally, but when he's meeting with his advisors who help run the empire, what should be done, right? Because, right, she did not follow the command of the king. Okay? So, there you have it. That's what's at stake. That's primarily, not to say that Xerxes doesn't have other issues at hand, but that's the primary issue. Okay? And let's continue on and see, well, what do they recommend? Okay? Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the queen has Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Okay? For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt. Since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and he did not, and she did not come. Okay. This is funny. Okay. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard all the queen's behavior will say the same to all the king's official, and there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. So, in other words, does her behavior help support the status quo, or does it undercut it? I'm not going to say whether you agree with it or not, but it's disruptive, because the most noble, the most powerful woman in the land did not follow the command of the most powerful king in the land. Right? That does not bode well for the kingdom. Yeah. Right? So now quoting Ghostbusters, cats and dogs will be living together. And if you like the movie Ghostbusters. Okay? So, and there's a little bit of wordplay here in the Hebrew too, so we'll bring that out. This is in the middle of page 4. What is to be done, that's italicized in English, to Queen Vashti because she has not performed. Same kind of Hebrew root word. Okay, what is to be done? Asa with the queen because of her not doing. Lo, which is like a no. No asa. Okay, so in other words, what can be done to undo what she did not do? That's kind of what the wordplay in the Hebrew kind of conveys, and the English doesn't quite do that. Okay, so he meets with his advisors, and basically he's saying, what could I do to undo what she did not do? Okay, so that's a polite way of saying, I'm just trying to basically fix what is now broken and keep it from going worse. Okay, so okay, yeah. So if Xerxes received wise advice, this portends a society easily destabilized, unmasking an empire internally weaker than outward appearances. I mean, if everything was solid and sure, and then if the queen did something, everyone, doesn't matter, right? Because, so there has to be something that can destabilize. I mean, do you think Xerxes really cares if somebody's internal domestic life at the home's in turmoil because of what his queen did? He doesn't care. He wants the empire to run smoothly. He wants everybody to honor every authority, so that way when something comes down from the top, it happens, right? And now he's thinking, well, this may not happen. So even though this guy kind of brings up the personal dynamic, an emperor is going to worry, well, what impact will this have in the running of the kingdom? Okay. Of course, he doesn't want disturbed homes. I mean, in the long term, disturbed homes really leads to a disturbed society, because homes really what? Right? The future generations within this empire come from homes, and so you want the homes to be stable. If you're looking at it from a purely self-serving perspective. It's in the empire's best interest to have stable homes, so when the kids grow up, they all follow the rules. Okay? And they become good working cogs in the empire, if you want to. Okay? So if you only looked at it from that perspective and nothing else, okay, which is, a bit of the best way to look at it, but okay. So yeah, things are not good. Okay, and this is his advice. Okay, so I think we need to kind of remove, especially the last few years, we kind of need to take off our woke whatever hat, or whatever it is where we try to judge everything in the past by our present thinking, because in the past people didn't think the way we do now. Otherwise, we won't be able to read a text faithfully. Okay, so we need to let the text just kind of unfold itself, and we could see all of these things. Okay, so even though he's personally angry and outraged, he's actually acting as a good emperor. He wants to know, how is this going to impact the empire? And what or if should I do? Okay, so so let's continue on, okay? So now this is what they say is happening now. Now they're going to give a couple of recommendations, okay? So if it please the king, right? Only if you agree with it, sir. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, okay? And let it be written among the Jews among the laws of the Persians and Medes, so that it may not be repealed, that Vashti is never again to come before King Xerxes. Okay? This doesn't mean that she's going to be executed, but it means that she's banished. Okay? She's removed completely from the court. So it's hard times at best. Okay? And let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. Somebody who's going to actually listen to the command of the king. You have to have somebody who listens to the command of the king. Okay? So the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast. All women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. Okay? So that's kind of, okay, this has to be dealt with. Okay? And so, yeah, you have to get rid of, right? Get rid of this one and get somebody who's actually going to obey your commands. So that way, what? Everybody in the kingdom knows that you must be listened to. That's important. Because in a vast empire like Persia, how many people actually have met the emperor, actually know him? 0.1%. Oh, maybe they might see him in public appearances, but it's a very small number. Which means, how do most people respond apart from local authorities who enforce the rule and everything else, right? It always starts first within the person, right? I mean, think about this. If every American no longer decided to follow the rule of law, what would happen? Would there be enough police to enforce order and peace? Of course not. Our country would collapse within days. See, and the reason why the rule of law upholds is because most people do that. Most people want that. Okay? Because what's the alternative? See? So, and so people don't know the emperor, but the emperor wants everybody to know he's an authority who needs to be followed. And that begins within. So that's perception, isn't it? Okay? Yeah. So, so this is the wordplay. The queen's behavior will be made known. Let a royal order. So this is really, note the wordplay, to counteract the weakening of authority by the word of the king. The word of kingship should go forth. So again, the same word is used to counteract so the king's word needs to counteract the queen's word. See, it's kind of, okay. So the text kind of shows us, if we say, well, is it mere wordplay, or does it show us an emperor who's trying to undo what has happened to keep everything functioning? See, so, but I'll just be a little cynical. Okay, so last night I was listening to an interview of our the head of the Department of Transportation, Peter Buttigieg. I was listening, right? And he was talking about, so the message of our administration really hasn't gone out. And of course, I'm an old curmudgeon now, and I said, I don't care about your message. I want you to fix the crap that you broke. That's what I said. And Troy's looking at me like, they can't hear you on the TV. Right? So that's the king. He wants to fix what is broken. Okay? All right. So let's read verses 21 and 20. We're going to see, what does the king do? Okay. This advice pleased the king and the princes. And the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script. So there isn't, everyone doesn't use the Persian language because this is a vast empire. And so even though everyone has to swear fealty to the emperor and obey his laws, he allows some autonomy. Okay? To every province in its own script and to every people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. So he's basically saying, I'll allow you guys your autonomy as long as you all, right, honor me and follow my rules. That's the bottom line, right? So we kind of get an understanding of the Persian Empire that it demands 100% loyalty, but within that, it allows some freedom and autonomy. I mean, it was Persia that allowed the Jews to go home if they wanted to, right? After Babylon exiled them. So, yeah. Okay, so there we have it. That's the end of chapter 1. Okay? So the picture is, take off our present day hats, The picture is of a king trying to manage an empire, and things within his own court did not go well. Well, the irony of all of this is, of course, if you were familiar with some of the book of Esther, is that here he gets rid of the queen he cannot control, and he ends up having one who basically controls him. Okay.
Excuse me, what's so unusual about that?
Oh, well, I remember I'll just share this with you, a personal kind of thing with my dad. And my dad and I were talking, and he was telling me how women really, really are the ones who keep a culture together and make everything function. I said, well, what do you mean? So I'm a kid, and you look around, and it's basically men who are running everything, the companies, the government, right? And then he says, well, son, who do you think raises families? Who do you think, learns whatever we need to learn so that way that everything goes well? And there were other things, but basically, it was, to a large degree, even though maybe not officially, women really run the country. Okay. But it's in the sense that what? But it's within the sphere of their vocation, was kind of what my dad was. He didn't use those terms. Those are kind of Lutheran ways of thinking, but that was really what he was kind of saying. And so it is kind of interesting to ponder on those things as I continue to get older. Okay. On page 5, I wrote a little blurb on the history between chapters 1 and 2. Okay, because, and I think when you read Esther 1 and then you know the history of what follows between chapter 1 and 2, that Xerxes really is concerned about being able to, about his empire, its future, how long will it survive, can it withstand other powers on the rise or other competition. So the text of Esther does not give us all the details of history outside its storyline. Beyond the citadel of Susa, much took place to challenge King Xerxes and the Persian Empire. Persia suffered a disastrous year at war with the Greek city-states. At first in this war, the Persian army looked to be on another series of stunning victories. Xerxes' vast army crossed the ocean at Hellespont and entered Greece, crushing the Greeks at Thermopylae. Not Thermopolis, Wyoming, mind you. Marching to Athens, not Athens, Georgia, mind you, burning both city and the Acropolis. The Persian navy, another story, sailed into the Straits of Salamis seeking to trap the Greek navy. The straits, however, confined the large Persian fleet. So it's almost like, if you're familiar with Queen Elizabeth and the naval battle that takes place, was it 1588 or something? And the British Navy has smaller ships and we're able to outmaneuver the larger Spanish galleons and wins the victory. Okay, so the straits, however, confined the large Persian fleet. Ships had difficulty maneuvering and became disorganized. Seizing the opportunity, the Greek fleet formed in a line and scored a decisive victory. Several months later, the Greeks sank the remnants of the Persian fleet at Plataea. Oh man. That, you have to say, how can you recover? You can, but it's hard. Because basically, your entire sea power is destroyed. So, which means the Persian Empire is going to be landlocked now. Because the Persian Empire won't be able to extend its power where it needs water. At least if the Persian Empire doesn't rebound in a good way. Okay? Never again will Greece be in danger of Persian conquest. Greece will over time rise to become a world power while Persia would lay in defeat. This future, however, is not so soon, though King Xerxes returns home beaten and embarrassed by a nation of weaker city-states. So it's quite humiliating. Huge empire. Persia has a larger army, a larger military, and is defeated. In his military and personal pain, we find ourselves next week at the beginning of Esther chapter 2. There we are, guys. Thoughts, questions?
It was certainly fun.
No. Well, just be glad that our life is not held at the whim of right?
It's interesting that what was still is
Yeah, yeah,
today with households and
yeah. So I'll do a short little aside because we really haven't had to kind of live under authoritarian dictatorships, not really, okay? And after, during the whole time when Saddam Hussein was kind of running around, and he was a horrific man, horrible. And of course, in our American ideal, well, no, things could never get worse than this dude. Well, of course they can. It's just that we can't imagine it because we've never lived through worse, right? But speaking with people, if you understood how he thought, you were okay. If you didn't, you'd end up being dead and it would be horrific. So if he saw you as a risk, you and your family or your entire village would be gone. No questions asked. That was just, and so there were, these horrific destruction of towns and villages, which in the ancient world was not weird. It is weird today, right? But if you understood how he operated and think, you just go, okay, I'll just do nothing that threatens his power. And so, and if you were a minority, either ethnic or religious, you liked a guy like this. Because if not, then the majority basically picks on you and beats you up, and which is what after he gets overthrown, we see the Yazidis and the Christians and other groups just, the Mandaeans being persecuted and murdered and whatnot. So, really, not that Xerxes seemed this cruel, but it's that same sort of thing. Well, if you understand the ways that the rules operate, you'll be fine and you'll thrive. If not, well, it's at your own risk for you and your family. So that's kind of tough, right? Because for us to say, wait a minute, you mean my family's going to be punished for whatever? Right? So, and that has never happened in our, well, I'm not going to say never. I mean, there's been a little bit of this politically the last couple of years where some of our, anyways, instruments of power kind of go after someone's family to make a point, but let's hope that is soon behind us. Any thoughts? Because we need to kind of understand, I don't know if we can understand how these things work, because we've never experienced it. And even when we fought against Britain, really? Because we didn't, when you really think about it, on the big scale of things, we went to war over some taxes. We're a pretty surly people, I'll tell you. Because, wow, we actually had it pretty good. Britain was actually paying most of our way, but I don't want to seem unpatriotic, so I won't go too deep into that. Okay, let's close with prayer, shall we? Our Father, we ask for open minds as we go through the text of Esther, so we may understand what is happening and understand it in a way that lets us, learn what we should, to see how you're working behind certain situations. And through that, may we understand how you work through people and situations in our lives, even though it looks as if none of that is happening. For that is what it looked like to the Jews living within Persia at a certain point. We pray that you give us such faith and understanding all our days. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.